Hello, hello, hello. This is the Duke coming back at you again. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and this Sunday moment. Hope everyone is doing well. It's been a while since I posted the live stream. But anyway, today we are going to discuss, as you can see in the thumbnail, Anthony Joshua, being beaten by Ukraine's Alexander Oski, butchered his name. Deontay Wilder lost to the Gypsy King, Tyson Fury. These are just examples. These are imagery, of course. And the topic is based on how participating in Victim Olympics, the past 2-3 years, BLM movement has made men, black men, behave, act, and look weak. The reason why I want to address this is it's a very touchy subject, and most definitely that's what I tend to do. I really want to touch on very difficult subjects, and my problem with a movement that to me is a lot different from the previous movements that have actually been very impactful is that it reinforces today what we are reinforcing in the imagery I'm showing you today, that black people in the West in particular have built an intact idea of, our drive, our victory, our push for wins throughout the generations. And the last century, we saw a big pivot, a big change, and a lot of us learn about it today. Being from the UK, people who would know the month of October is Black History Month, definitely discussed on different panels, on the importance of, I guess, remembering the past. But in what way are we going to continue the, what we've learned and what we want to overcome and so and so. The issue today is it's a lot different than what our forefathers, our grandparents dealt with during their time when it comes to racism, discrimination. We've contextualized it a lot in different videos, but today I want to explain the impact of what today's struggle or fight for change has done to us as men in particular. On my platform I tend to discuss men and the situations we go through, and I would say this in first and foremost is it affected us to the greatest Q. Good afternoon, Woolworth. Nice to hear from you. It's been a while. Thank you for tuning in. So I'm just gonna, keep our stream short, maybe under an hour. But this is a very important subject, and possibly I would have a panel to discuss it too, where anyone who disagrees with me on the concepts that is, how these movements have actually impacted how we think, how we behave, and it's actually made us more complacent. The reason why I say this is because what it does is it places us in a victim mentality constantly, regardless of what type of work we're doing, what type of personal improvement we may be facing. We always have a hold and a barrier when it comes to how we think about ourselves and how people around us think. And I know for a fact it's changed how I've behaved and think. Because let's say 4 years ago, I was very much into these movements. For example, Black Lives Matter has actually been around for years. Whoever was around, whoever was in tune with social media would know that it's been circulating for a while from the start when Trayvon Martin was murdered by a neighborhood watchdog, quote unquote. Zimmerman. People might be familiar with those names, but whoever was proactive during that period would remember how, the BLM movement kind of sprouted. And there were concerns in the beginning. A lot of the first wave protesters would tell you, a lot of people would recognize that it felt very manufactured. It was an opportunity to sort of always take wave and follow through with certain incidents that happens around the US, and then it essentially spread across the world. And of course the reason why social media is always brought up in my conversations is it's literally the medium in which our situation is being spread. And so it connects us across the world, but at the same time, it leads us to sort of an easier way to infect the minds of young people, young men, um, believing that they can't do anything because they're under the the powers above them that are preventing them from pursuing higher, because they just believe, white supremacy is going to stop us from earning anything. Imagine if that was the mentality of, grandparents had when they moved to the West, or, if you're an ADOS man, you would know that your great grandparents and grandparents fought, they fought in every war, they looked for jobs, they worked the lowest jobs, and they earned for you to be where you are today. But imagine if they had the same mentality we are today, and were affected by our mental health, quote unquote. And I'm going to go through it somewhat. I'm going to describe why it's very important to distinguish between how men have reacted to this movement and how women have reacted to this movement, and how important it was. Yes, what's up, bro? Yes. The longer streams are definitely good. I'll keep it short for 1 hour, but if my other platform, we're actually on tonight. So if you tune in on Not Your Average Joe in the next 4 hours, I will be on there. So don't worry about it. We're going to be on for a little longer. But yeah, thanks for tuning in. But yeah, overall, I wanted us to touch base on this topic as soon as possible. So I've got a few slides when it comes to women. Yeah, we can address it real quickly. I believe, a lot of athletes, I'm using the example of athletes, for example, because it's very much a visible representation of what I'm discussing. Someone like Sha'Carri Richardson, people will remember her. She, scored first place. Her most famous clip of her running and, blasting through all her competitors. And then what happened within a month or two? She was banned because she was smoking weed, and people made it seem as if it was a racial aspect, and it prevented her from thriving because she was a black woman. And if it was someone else, it's unfair. Why it should be legalized? Why isn't it impossible in a athletic sport? But hold on, a lot of substances that are legal, just not legal in races, not legal in sports. You shouldn't be drinking before a game. You shouldn't have taken any form of recreational drugs, even if it's legal, before a game, before a sport. So I mean, she made a mistake, and she had to pay for that, due diligence. And guess what? Look, but then there was this drive, this social media sort of age has caused us to sort of create a different judgment, like, oh no, it's unfair, it's unfair, it's unfair, this is injustice in a different form. And what did that lead to? It led to, Sha'Carri, she gained a lot of clout, a lot of notoriety, and she actually gained a Nike commercial, sponsorship. Of course, that's worth millions. And then within months, being able to return on the track, what happened to her? She lost. And people would say, it's because of her stress and mental illness. And of course, yeah, that's very important. But that wasn't very clear in the beginning, was it? But as I mentioned in the beginning, it's about complacency. So I'm using the women as an example for now. But to me, I would say women, of course, would react differently to social pressures. And of course, it would be unfair. But I would say that there is a double standard. Men and women should not see themselves in the same light. But a major example I was just going to use, because it does affect how women think and behave. Same with Naomi Osaka. She's a famous tennis player. She's taken the throne now from Serena Williams and Venus Williams, those who dominated the 90s and early 2000s. And, now this is a new era, another, woman, another black woman who is representing in the sport and taking on for the next generation. And what's the obstacle for her? Her own, personal characteristics kind of impeding on what is demanded for tennis players. A lot of athletes have to do press releases. And for her, she doesn't like the pressure of having to answer questions constantly. It's taking a toll on her mental health and so on. It's fair enough. But at the same time, you've just signed a deal with Netflix and you're promoting a documentary of yourself. You're famous, and you might see this girl on social media conversating with people, showing how famous she is, basically collabing with artists, dating a famous rapper. Or it seems as if you're in the limelight, enjoying the fame, but you don't want to take on a certain duty and responsibility for your role as a, famous tennis player. Overall, women may have a certain approach to fame, and we want to pick and choose today how we want to be seen. Same with Simone Biles, a great, wonderful, beautiful gymnast who made strides in the last 3-4 years. But there was a huge change recently since this period, this period of protests and we want to reflect on how black people are treated in the world, no matter what level they're in. If you're a celebrity or an athlete, you're also impacted by racism and the pressures of being black, and the issue is we have become complacent. You can't compare the people, that came before us to us. We've turned into snowflakes. Is that the legacy we want to carry on? Is that the example we want to give to the younger people coming before us, that we have to whine and complain rather than actually make moves? I'm using boxing, for example, a lot of athletes, because they are the sort of blatant imagery of success or wins and losses, and kind of explaining how come we take boxing to a more racial aspect. When we see a black and a white athlete fight in the ring, we just assume, of course the black guy is going to win at this rate. And it's been going on for a few decades because we built that imagery. We're like, look, our black players, our black athletes will want to fight harder for success because this is all they've got. But other than their profession, they are treated differently in society, but then they fought for it. Muhammad Ali, for example, the greatest, that was his slogan, sting like a bee, it's like he was known for that. But at the heights of racism in the West, at a period when being black was a crime, essentially, wherever you go, if you have to be behind the bus hair, you have to be in certain areas, you can't be out at a certain time. Muhammad Ali lived in a time of trauma for black Americans, but yet he could fight every match and defeat and throw blows, untouchable, swung like crazy. And guess what? Yeah, he was vocal. He was vocal when it was necessary, and he was passionate. And what have we said before? We can speak on racism, but our actions speak louder than words. What are we doing to show the magnitude of our, athleticism or our profession? Are we actually representing what they say a lot? Or whatever they do, we have to work 3-4 times harder than they do to get the same result. But the situation today is, I don't think that's the case for a lot of people. People aren't working 2 times harder. In fact, people are working less than the average person, white or Asian or any other group, and complaining about racism. That's the problem, that we are lying to ourselves. People don't want to compete, even if you had to work 2 times harder. The case is, the world isn't fair. Reality isn't fair. Social constructs do not adhere to reality. You have to accept that. Overall, we can't change things overnight. We can continue to push forward, but it comes with action. It comes with action. I'm going to give an example of everyone knows Anthony Joshua, Femi, who lost the game against the Ukrainian beast. And, that was a really good fight, but it really showed, Anthony Joshua was all talk to a lot of people. I think he's still a good fighter, but he did become complacent. We noticed that the drive to win wasn't really there. It was a struggle. Those rounds were struggle. I mean, the Ukrainian fighter was a great fighter, but at the same time, it was like he wasn't as known or sponsored as Anthony Joshua. And that's the fear of being famous so far, is that you become complacent. You forget what it means to fight. You're enjoying the fruits of your labor. But are you the best fighter in the world? That's the case there as well. So I'm going to show a quick video on in which Anthony Joshua actually spoke on, the racism and discrimination in the last 2 years, almost like a emulation of like, for example, a Muhammad Ali. He was outspoken. I'm going to just provide the link 1 second of the video file. I hate this part of the stream where I have to find my content. So anyone who came out to speak on, he was reading a speech, so it's very
it's not Reese Tim. Who is it?
Reese.
Oh, Reese Fatal. Okay, Reese Fatal. Me and him used to get up to a lot of mischief when we were younger, and you can never judge a man for who he once was. As you said, it's not what you do, it's who you are. So here we have from Fatal Reese.
Bear with us 1 second.
Today we join many thousands of protesters in the UK and many hundreds of thousands across the globe. We stand united against the virus that has been instrumental in taking lives. Lives of the young, old, rich, and even...
Oh, I'm sorry about that. It must have cut off for 1 second. I was about to share a clip of was it Anthony Joshua, giving a speech on the BLM movement, and I mean it was a useful form of co-signing, but I would say
it's not Reese Tim. Who is?
I would say it did to me. Watching this, I'll give my feedback on this, but to me it wasn't enough to change anything. What was he doing throughout that period? Was he training? Was he sponsoring? What was he doing for himself? Or being at the top of your game, you kind of have to prove yourself even more in your own craft. But overall, hey, how are you coming out to the people? Are you representing the community right? This speech got a lot of controversy, but we'll explain why after.
Oh, Reese Fatal. Okay, Reese Fatal. Me and him used to get up to a lot of mischief when we were younger, and you can never judge a man for who he once was, as you said.
So at this point, he was recollecting whose speech he's about to read out. It's not his speech, but someone gave it out to him to read. So it's almost as if he came unprepared. It was like, oh, I'm going to be a mouthpiece for the people. And I think it's kind of unfair. A lot of athletes kind of speak from the heart, even if you have to write it down, that's cool. But he called it out like, hey, I'm about to read out a speech from a friend. This is what we have to do as a people. Compared to, like, let's say a Muhammad Ali or, all these big athletes who kind of spoke out against racism. It was passionate. It was cleared and thought out. And to be honest, we have a generation of folks who are celebrities, athletes, and they feel the need to speak on racism, but you can tell they are not as they're not as prepared for the conversation because they don't live that reality. A lot of the times these figures kind of put themselves in that position to help and represent, but they're not prepared. They don't know what the issues are really. Because when we speak on racism, what level of racism are we talking about? Is it preventing us from living? Is it preventing us from finding work, are we separated by race now? What is the case? What are we dealing with today? I'm going to delve into it in a different stream, more on like how racism is different in the West today as it was in the past, and why we can actually mitigate and deal with these situations on our own without having to play on virtual signaling and victim Olympics with the rest of the world. Like, we're going to touch on that later, but let's listen to the speech. Let me not intervene one more time.
It's not what you do, it's who you are. So here we have from Fatal Reese. Today we join many thousands of protesters in the UK and many hundreds of thousands across the globe. We stand united against the virus that has been instrumental in taking lives. Lives of the young, old, rich, and even poor. A virus that is not apologetic a virus that spreads across all sectors of our communities, sports, education, churches, entertainment, the media, and even the government, not just in the UK, but across the world. The virus has been declared a pandemic. It is out of control. And I'm not actually talking about COVID-19. The virus I'm referring to is called racism. How long are we going to allow racism to spread through our communities? And right now we are in the community and affect our lives without using the vaccine you already have in your possession. What is the possession? Me and you. You are the vaccine.
Fair use, fair use.
I am the vaccine. We can no longer, from today onwards, be proud. We can no longer sit back and remain silent on the senseless, unlawful killings, sly racism of another human being based only on what? Their skin color. We need to speak out in peaceful demonstrations, just like today, so well done, Watford. Inject the vaccine. We must not use a demonstration for selfish motives and turn it into rioting and looting. We need to be united in non-violent demonstrations, show them where it hurts, abstain from spending your money in their shops and in economies, and invest in black-owned businesses. And that's for all communities. If you want to uplift yourself, invest in your own businesses. We have to engage with the youth. I completely agree with that. And put an end to black youth gang culture. I'm going to be real with you about gang culture. I'm down to ride 100%. But what you have to realize is done. It is done, trust me. Unless you want to be sitting in jail, spending years upon years of your only life that you have, thinking about, yeah, they can lock the locks, but they can't stop the clocks. That's all done because there's too much cameras, too much intelligence. All the OGs that I know are telling me, bro, it's finished. It's finished. Gang life is finished. And that's what we're saying. I know that I'm not promoting no gangster business. I'm a legit, straightforward hustler. That's just in my...
Oh, while watching this video, I was looking at the back, and there were like two guys. You can see those two guys at the back. They looked at each other funny because they didn't agree with that. You know, so whoever's just listening now, I explained how in the beginning he introduced that this isn't his speech. This was a friend of his. You know, he gave it to him to read out. And of course, reading through it, you can tell, you know, he's reciting words he's not very inept in. He's not very passionate on. But then when he speaks on, you know, gang crime and the situation that affects the black community in the UK, that's pretty much a prominent conversation to have. And he spoke out almost like this is his words, you know. So at the same time, you know, playing the mouthpiece for a movement, which is, you know, raising awareness to certain situations. But I think, you know, at the end of the day, racism is a chronic condition in society, just like poverty is. And things will improve over time, and we have to push it, of course. But at the same time, action speaks louder than words. If you play the same role in the media, going around, you know, virtual signaling, speaking on things, how confident are you in your approach? Are you speaking on things that you're passionate about? So, for example, we've spoken on a lot of athletes, people who are listening now. Listen to the pre-recorded version, but I went down a list of athletes that have been going through a few things for the last 2 to 3 years. Sha'Carri Richardson, Simone Biles, Naomi Osaka. I mentioned the female athletes, but I would say I would give female athletes a pass because, again, men and women are different. Women do react more emotionally. And so if certain social issues are being brought up, there are certain impacts it has on anyone. So I use athletes as an example because they are the more visible imagery of what represents that impact. So in our daily lives, for example, when it came down to the BLM movement at its peak, so last year, there was a moment where people were having discussions on whether to make sure black students on campus could get leeway on exams and essays because, you know, all these social issues, all these protests were affecting how black people thought and focused. And to an extent, it makes sense. But at the same time, it paints a picture that we need extra help as black people. We go through racism. I do understand that. But at the same time, it sounds more like we need a pacifier because we can't deal with the world. As if there aren't generations of our people who have gone through worse and have worked 2 times, 3 times harder. But yeah, we somehow need a special treatment. I don't think so. I think it will make things worse for us if we play that game. And we'll see examples like that out in other parts of the world, non-black groups as well, who have been complacent because they were told that they were the weak link, they were the victims, and there's nothing they could do unless things change, when in fact you can actively change things by being more proactive, that by being more aggressive in the way you pursue your goals. And so I use these athletes as an example. Someone like Anthony Joshua, he was put up there. He was like the number one, represented. People say, oh, because he was so successful, they don't even see him as an African Brit. They see him as just British. Oh, now they're saying that, now they're calling him Femi to insult him because he loses. I don't think that's the case. I think it's just that he was overgassed, used as this, top boxer, heavyweight champion, untouched. But the situation is, yeah, he speaks some things when he needs to, but how did he spend his time as the winner of the ring? Did he become complacent? And did he use certain forms of media to sponsor himself, to represent a sort of Muhammad Ali figure? I believe so. And at the end of the day, look how things have turned out. Deontay Wilder, the same thing. Lost a lot of games, and the overgassing of certain figures. I don't blame him. I think it kind of led on to the wave of victimhood. It's happening today. Let me finish this clip to just move on.
DNA in my blood, but I know I've taken my street knowledge and put it into the corporate world, and I've gained a lot of respect in that sense. So anyway, gang culture is done. So
the kids at the back were looking at each other like, I don't know what he's talking about. The black kids, the 2 black guys at the back. A lot of these guys they want to stay road. They want to continue to be street and protest at the same time. That's the issue. A lot of the protests that were occurring in London, if people can remember, you could tell a lot of guys there were goons. They wanted to take the opportunity to rally. Just like the 2011 riots, it kind of showed an example of that, where people who are opportunists aren't really here for the fight or for the plight, but they're here to encourage chaos and anarchy. And instead of kind of pointing them out like, oh, this is not what we associate with, we make excuses for them. We baby them. We cover up for them. And we speak for them. And the issue is, that's what's the issue. I wanted to have a conversation about this in another stream, where we have to start dividing ourselves in terms of those who are out here that want to work, that want to grind, that want to make a change, and those who are just here to cause havoc. And we make excuses for them because, black people are all treated the same. I don't think so. I'm not going to allow society to play that game. I'm not going to let people on social media play that game. We are not all the same. Those who are complacent and don't want things to change and actually, cause trouble in society, they need to be called out until they change. Then they can join in on the plight, on the struggle for black excellence, as we want to call it. Black excellence there's only one form, which is success, which is work ethic, which is trumped on meritocracy than anything else. Okay, so overall, yeah, that's the message I wanted to give to people. I will post the link to that speech if you want to listen to the long version. But overall, yeah, I wanted to have this conversation. At the end of the day, we can't continue to play this game with the world, in the West especially. There are other issues to be dealing with. Poverty, yes. Poverty affects everyone, and I think that's why people want to avoid that topic, because we know that once we start talking about poverty in the black community in the UK, poverty in the ADOS community, then we have to raise question to, the whataboutisms. What about this culture of people? The Hispanics actually have lower income than black Americans, so why don't we focus on them too? When you contextualize the reasons why, then it makes sense. Everyone of any creed, any race, go through the same plight when it comes to struggling economically. Yes, that's the goal. So what's the solution to that? Fixing it, fixing the family structure, fixing the what do you call it? The mindset in terms of how we pursue our goals, starting from young. How is education being taught? How are kids motivated to pursue certain careers? What do we look down on? What kind of costumes we look down on based on what we consider white or black practices? And I think to an extent, even though we've assumed the older you get, the less ignorant you get. Most older people I've heard, on social media, in person, on these panels, a lot of people who I'd assume are, more mature because they're a few years older than me, would know what the solutions are. But that's what Victim Olympics is all about at the end of the day. People forget. People don't spend their time figuring things out. Because the excuse is the white man's, out to get us. How to step on our necks. That game is over now, guys. Things won't change. The white guilt is prevalent. It's there. But it's not going to help you. It's not going to save you. Handouts won't save you. Reparations won't save you. You are the controller of your own life. I don't have to say this. This isn't rocket science. This is very clear. At the end of the day, this movement has shown us a lot. For the last 2 years, we've seen a lot. We've seen a lot visually. Guess what? It's not the only movement that has been running, rampant around the world. You've got the Extinction Rebellion. People laugh at that, but that's how people are. That's how we look like sometimes. The Extinction Rebellion believing that, global warming is going to kill us. I mean, there are some truth to how, temperature rising is going to impact our tides, our, regular life. But at the end of the day, the way they came about it was it going to change anything? I think not. BLM movement, how has it changed anything other than raise awareness, which is good. But are we going to do this for the next 4 years? And in the beginning of the stream, I discussed how whoever was around, for example, I was very much pro-black and whatever you want to call it, woke, SJW 4 years ago, 5 years ago, when BLM started. Whoever was around then would remember Trayvon Martin. That's where it sparked sort of this new generation of racial injustice and raising awareness to that. Trayvon Martin was beaten and killed by George Zimmerman because we didn't have any visible evidence like recording. We just have a voice recording of certain aspects of that incident. And he was indicted. So George Zimmerman got away with killing him because apparently he was a thug. And so that started a movement there. BLM started there. And then you had the Michael Brown situation. He was shot by the police. The police believed he, claimed that he struggled with Michael Brown, who wasn't complying, and it led to him being shot. But then again, that was a child. That was a 17-year-old. He was shot and killed, cold blood. We can say that. There wasn't enough evidence for that. There were certain snippets and cameras, but now we have body cameras. So to me, the movement has brought something. And at the time, when I was in support of it, it made sense. And things changed. But overall, what we're seeing is that we forget that police incidents happen every single day. Thousands and thousands of incidents. And we know that 95 or more % of those cases are being dealt with by police properly. If they're going into communities that are detrimental, impoverished, and a lot of gang violent activity, what do we expect would change? I predict confidently that within the next 6 months, another incident like this would occur again. It would occur again because you still have those environments. They still exist. There will still be a lot of black kids from the ages of 12 to 18, even older, with a criminal record, with bad experiences with police because not being taught to comply, and this sort of social climate that we live in today. And in fact, these body cameras are actually saving more police officers than they are the quote unquote victims of these incidents, because we see time and time again. Next time I'm gonna post clips of these. Time and time again, perpetrators of crime would lie or would have their own alibi, and then these body cameras and more safer, to me, more surveillance is actually protecting the people who are innocent now. And at this point, the police officers who are doing the right thing, who are following protocol, are still being treated as if they are the devil. And I'm not siding with the police, but I'm siding with truth. And if I see a movement is making up an agenda that isn't true, right, then I'm going to speak on it. I'm going to speak out on it. I'm not in support of any side, but I'm in support of a truth. So once we go on in 20 minutes, for 20 more minutes left, I'm going to speak on, anyone else is here. What's up, Kerry Benford? BLM is divisive Marxist movement that has put race relations in the UK back. Yes, and to be honest, in the UK in particular, it's good you even mentioned it in that way. People do claim that it is like a Marxist movement, and to be honest, there is evidence of that. You know, the quote-unquote leaders of BLM have come out proudly saying that they are students of Marxism. And it's like, you can't play games like this. Like, it's right in our faces overall. What's up, Falcon Black Vlogs? Yeah, what's up, man? Oh guy. Yeah, that's me. But yeah, I was speaking on this for the last 30 minutes. We just went through a lot on how a lot of these athletes are, in a way, psychologically impacted by the social issues that have been occurring in the last 2-3 years. That's been amplified in the last 2-3 years. And them participating in the movement has actually, maybe to an extent, affected how they form. So it's one example to explain. Let me bring out the slide now. 1 second. Bear with me. But overall, yeah, it points out a lot of disparaging issues, like mentally. We know we talk about mental health these days, but the generations that came before us, if we want to speak on mental health, they went through shite. Okay? They went through the worst forms of racism. Yet, when they worked 2-3 times harder than the rest of us, they succeeded in their own right, but they had less than us. To an extent, I believe we are the most spoiled generation. So unprepared for the obstacles that will exist. And we like to create double standards and say, oh, if the white man could do this, the black man should be able to do this. Oh, we make comparisons based on criminality now. Like we make excuses for criminals now. When we speak on how we compare white criminals to black criminals, you know, in the US, they use that aspect that the courts are racist. Systemically, it creates a atmosphere that causes black people to be criminalized more. But when you look at those cases, they compare a lot. Sometimes the cases where the white criminal, maybe that was their first ever incident or cause of crime, and then they do get a lesser sentence because it's their first form of, arrest. But then the black male criminal most likely had a previous case, and he's being criminalized even further. You know, the first strike rule, I don't know how effective it is today, but in a sense, a lot of these narratives being created on social media is taking out a lot of context in order to just show you that, oh, look, black versus white, still treated differently. And when it's not the case. Yes, racist incidents occur constantly in the West, where people in power abuse it constantly, but it's on an individual basis. Why do I stress that even further? Because when you look at a case-by-case scenario, you can see why certain mistakes occurred that had nothing to do with racism, but because the victim or the perpetrator was black, we feel the need to address it as a racial issue. We are easily influenced by imagery, easily influenced by a headline, and then we forget about, hey, maybe that there can be nuance to this situation. That's a problem, man. That's a major problem. And I do not want this to continue to infect the minds of our generation. I call the spoiled generation. If we continue to lie to ourselves. But other than that, I want us to work on a change mentally, because people are acting on change at the end of the day. Overall, yeah, I made my point. But if anyone has any disagreements, just let me know before I tune out. But overall, man, I had to express this as much as I can. As black men in general, when we play on this sort of agenda where we kind of whine and cry about things that, may affect us, it continues to form this sort of domino effect in which we don't look for solutions when that's our role as men. Let's say we all live in a village. As men, we have to provide and protect. But if there are invaders entering our dominion, we have to prepare ourselves with bows and arrows and swords. I'm going back medieval period, okay? But then, what do women do? They find a way to protect themselves. They hide. They quibble around each other. If there are men involved, they take on the road to protect and fight back. But men today don't realize their role. Black men today don't realize their role. In fact, black men want to be black women so much that we continue to whine. We complain about how we are being fetishized. Like, that's what women complain about. We complain about how men should, black men should, sort of certain goals and expectations that you expect from women. That's my issue, is that I am embarrassed to be associated with a group of people who feel the need to cry and complain. You know what I mean? Let me jump on the comment section. What's up with everyone? What's everyone saying? Oh God, I may have to rewatch this. Yeah, this one is a trigger moment. I wanted to touch on this. It's dangerous. Thank you for tuning in, bro. Thank you so much. Kerry Benford says, racism doesn't just exist in the West, my friend, it's worldwide. Exactly. I completely agree, bro. Whoever knows me knows that I profess to be a history junkie. I read on everything, not just my history, not just African history. I read on a particular Asian history, social issues, and different political movements. And what you see are parallels. Whatever is occurring here, when it comes to racism, tribalism, certain ideologies, there's infighting amongst all these different groups. But for some reason, especially on social media, black people think we're this special race of victims, that everyone is out to get us and we are the target of demise. Yes, we are maybe one of the lowest economically in the West, but does it mean that we're the only people going through shit? Like, come on. Well, we're playing tit for tat for whatever is in our own narrow understanding of the world. Bro from Brom says, I know you about to sign out, but let me say one thing. A few days ago, I was saying to my buddy, we British blacks generally have a negative relation to the wider society. Generally have a negative relation. Yeah, okay. So are you saying a negative point of view or understanding of things? We need to build a positive relational, or you mean relationship, relational to wider society. Good on you, bro. Miss your content. Thank you so much. This will definitely motivate me to tune in more, to create more content, but I'll work on it. Yeah, relationships. Okay. Yeah. So overall, I think it is a mindset. It definitely is a mindset. We are stuck on this sort of weak agenda. I call it a weak agenda because I'm leaving out women at the part. When we talk about black people, we try and involve black men and women. But to be honest, whatever men do, our women follow eventually. So whatever we do as a people is really down to what men are doing to change things. So black men in general, let me speak on black men in the UK, for example. We speak on a lot of stuff that really has nothing to do with us. So when we speak on, the African American plight, we forget to contextualize what we go through on our own. to understand our situation, because honestly, the UK may be what do people call it? The belly of the beast when it comes to racism and white supremacy in the West. But we can tell the differences between how we're treated in the UK and how black people in America are treated. When it comes to police, yes, police may target young black boys in the streets of London, but I know for a fact if you live in other parts of the UK, you're not being dealt with the same way. Is it because there's more racism in London, or is it because it's expected that, hey, if we have a huge problem with knife crime and it's demographically us being dealt with in a specific way because we are perpetuating it, then it kind of makes sense why police behave a certain way in London versus in Chelmsford. I've lived in Essex, I've lived in Chelsea, I've lived in Hertfordshire. I know for a fact there are differences in which law enforcement behave with me than if I'm in an urban city metropolitan area, because if I am seeing a stereotypical behavior amongst my bros, then I understand how people view us. But at the same time, I'm not excusing racism, I'm not excusing prejudice, but how are we preventing ourselves from being seen that way? I know for a fact the generations that came before us knew exactly how to avoid trouble. Trouble just came their way, but it seems as if we look for the trouble in a way. The young people seem to control the narrative now. I don't want a 17-year-old representing me when he hasn't really lived life, because I know my 17-year-old self didn't know a lot about the world. They didn't know exactly what racism meant. So at the end of the day, who controls the narrative? As black men, like, we control our narrative when we speak on it. But black men, look, what our role isn't to cry and to hide away and to make excuses for our wrongdoings, or to defend criminals, or to defend people who do wrong, to burn buildings down, to be violent without controlling ourselves, or to not even have an agenda. It's embarrassing. So for people who have brains, stop defending disorder and stop making it about how another group of people are coming to get us. Because throughout humanity's history, there were always winners and losers. And the losers worked their way up to find a way to compete and win over everything else, everyone else. So, for example, in a sport, if you lose in the Premier League, if you're on the bottom of the table, what do you do to make sure that there could be change? You continue to just accept that, hey, those teams above me, they have more clout, they have more money, they have more influence. There's nothing I can do to change that. Or I want to make sure in the next 4 seasons from now, we're going to climb up the tables. We're going to have more influence. We're going to, it's like, that's what we do. That's what we fight for. And every racial group do it. And throughout time. But we play this victim game. And to be honest, in the social media sphere, a lot of people don't really believe what they say. At one point, I would say people just speak on things to sound like victims in order to gain views. That's the easiest way to gain subscription. On YouTube, for example, all you have to do is complain about how racism is bad for us, how just basically say the status quo, that we're at the bottom and there's nothing we can do, we're against white supremacy, and then you gain likes and views and support. Whoever was around during 2014, 2013, that was big on YouTube. You had the Cynthia G's, you had Tariq Nasheed, you had O'Shea Duke Jackson, all these American, and then you had some UK content creators doing the same thing, complaining, making noise, and then now it's turned on each other. Men and women in the community are complaining about the men are doing this, the women are doing this, but it's as if no one really wants a solution. We just want to whine and complain because that's easy clicks, easy views, and so on. And no one wants to take accountability. And everyone notices that I'm on different panels. I might speak on how there's a gender bias, there's a difference in how black women behave and how we should But you see on my platform here, I speak mostly on how men need to change. I critique men more. I critique black men more. I call out the simpery in our community. I call out how useless we've been for the last few years. And instead of seeing more content creators talk on this, people are avoiding the conversation because you don't want to be seen as a sellout, you don't want to be seen as a coon. But if you're not a truth teller, you will not last. You will not last in terms of content creating because you would run out of excuses. So first and foremost, we need to stop making excuses. We need to avoid movements like this as black men and men in general, people who listen who are, non-black and maybe, curious about, this kind of conversation. You would understand this, that the more we speak the way we do, being the victim, finding others to blame, the more we run out of excuses on where we need to be today. That needs to end. At the end of the day, go back into the gym, go back training, get your spotter, lift them weights, blow up some what do you call them, the punching bags, and let's get fighting. Let's start training. Let's defeat the next opponent. I'm using the analogy of an athlete, but overall, yeah, thank you guys for listening. Just under an hour. If you want to, you can tune in again tonight on my other platform that I co-host with my other two co-hosts on Not Your Average Joe. I'll leave a link below. We're discussing other topics, but this is obviously my solo channel. Thanks for tuning in. I will definitely have an open panel on the next show. We'll let you know in the next week. I will try and get it in within this week, but I'll let you know in general. But thank you all for tuning in. Besides the point, I hope I've triggered some folks. I may be called a troll, a sellout, whatever you want to say. But I did want to raise some concerns. I am concerned about how things are going today. Until things change, it will continue to deteriorate. But thank you all for listening. Tune in again on This is the Duke. Have a good Sunday.